Hi, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to take a few minutes to go over some takeaways from the essays, especially the first one. I feel like there's a lot of little things that we can tweak and really work on, so I just want to point those out to you. So I'm on Leah's page. I haven't graded it yet, so we won't look at hers. We're just looking at the question and the rubric. All right, so a couple little things before we get into the big one. Some of you are missing this first section. Select and completely identify another work from this unit. Remember, if you choose one of the three provided, then you have to have two other identifiers outside of the title because the title was provided. So you could say the artist, the year, the time period, or the materials, but you got to have two of those or you don't get that point. When it says describe the iconography, think about iconography. It's not the overall interpretation of the piece. You're thinking of specific symbolic things that you're seeing in the piece. So you could talk about the past, present. Specifically, you see police officers harassing a family. You could talk about how we see multiple famous people here. You could name some of them, but you want to be more specific than just saying it's an overall interpretation of the history to now of Mexico. So more specific. As far as using specific visual evidence from both works to explain two similarities. So you don't want to just say two things that are similar without putting specific visual evidence. So when it asks for that, think about the reader not being able to see the piece. So it's what are some things that you see? Is it the fact that the canvas is really, really crowded? Is it the fact that we have lots of vibrant colors? You can think about all of those different shapes, styles, emphasis, focal points, variation, rhythm. All of those things are things that you can see. You could talk about the figures, the way that they're styled. You could talk about symbols that you see, but it's really about the visual that you see. All right, and then this is the one that I want to spend the most time on, because it's worth 3 points, and a lot of you are not quite getting it, so I think looking at it with the rubric will help. So I'm just going to read it first. Explain at least one difference in how the two works convey social or political messages with their respective cultures, art movements, or time periods. Use specific contextual evidence about both this work and the one that you select from your explanation. So it's looking for a difference, but it's a difference beyond something like materials. It's something that shows how they convey an idea. Okay, so if you just said materials, this is a fresco, and we look at the Oath of the Herati, and that's a oil on canvas, I think. It's not enough because it's not something that shows how an idea is conveyed. So let's look at this part in the rubric. I think that kind of breaks it down for you a little more. It's part 5, 6, and 7. So the first part, explaining a difference in how they convey a message, is articulating a defensible claim. So you are basically arguing a point that is an opinion a little bit. Okay, so for instance, if I chose Jacob Lawrence's piece down here, and I also chose, obviously, Diego Rivera's piece, what we have right here, I could say that the depiction of Jacob Lawrence's piece is much more simplistic and empty and abstracted than Diego Rivera's work, which is much more complicated and full. And the way that these convey separate messages is that Jacob Lawrence's piece really wanted to get rid of all of the clutter, so the message was very, very clear about the feeling, this stark feeling of segregation at the time. Whereas Diego Rivera's piece has a lot more, it's covering a lot larger of a length of time, showing the richness in the culture, and also showing lots of different pieces and elements of the history. So it's about coming up with something that you can prove, and then your evidence should be contextual, so it's not just things that we can see, it's stuff related to history. So for instance, we could talk about segregation down here, we could talk about the Mexican history or colonization up here, but it's really being specific with that evidence. My suggestion, have one sentence, which is your defensible claim, which is a difference between the two. and then one piece of evidence that is very clearly connecting it to the historical time period or the context of the piece, and then one for the other one as well. So those are just some brief examples. I will say also with the work of architecture, or never mind, that was from the last one. Yeah, so just think about being really specific with your evidence when it says visual versus contextual. And this is the part I want you guys to really focus on with your next essays. So thanks for listening.